Sup, freaks? This rip was brought to you by our good friends at River. River has a new referral program. Go to river.com/TFTC for $5 worth of Bitcoin. When you sign up, set up an account and buy $100, you're going to get $5 of Bitcoin on top of that. River is the most secure Bitcoin exchange since they don't rely on any third parties. They built everything in-house, from their wallets to their Lightning Network wallets. They also have zero fee, dollar cost averaging. Other platforms charge large fees and have giant spreads. Go with River to avoid that. If you set up your DCA, again, you're not going to pay any fees on those buys. River also has a relationship management team that's US based and available by phone for you or your business. You can actually call River to get some customer support. It's a great value add that is hard to find these days. And again, they build everything in-house, including their cold storage, and all Bitcoin is held one-to-one in their multi-sig cold storage wallets. But they encourage self-custody as Bitcoiners. So the goal is to get you Bitcoin and to get it off of River into a wallet that you control. They build everything in-house. It's the most secure exchange. They've got free dollar cost averaging, and they have the new referral program. So go to river.com/TFTC, sign up, and you'll get $5 worth of Bitcoin after you buy $100. Enjoy this rip.
Set them all, let them loose.
Oh, we're loose. We're loose. Bunch of loose geese right now, gentlemen. Pod 2 for the afternoon. Another Onramp announcement on TFTC. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us again.
It's weird saying welcome back since we do a show once a week together now.
It's true. And we've been talking for 2 hours already today.
Yes.
But you're the full captain now.
I am the full captain. And since this is my show, in my domain, I do want to get some critical feedback. How do you guys think the last trade is going?
Ooh, that's a fun topic. I think it's going really well. I think that, we have several thousand people listening to our shows every week. And I think that speaks to the fact that people are interested in the business side, the finance side of Bitcoin. And hopefully we're scratching that itch for people.
It's been interesting. I didn't know how to think about it other than I just came from the core principle that I think we all have really cool conversations behind the scenes, like about business and Bitcoin and over dinners and drinks. And I thought other people would want to have those conversations or come on and talk about their side of the business that most people don't get to hear from. The biggest shock has been that everybody that I know that's tangentially like related to the industry listens. So somebody's listening. And they've said good things. So that's been pretty cool.
Long time listener, first time caller. But I genuinely do learn something I get like those couple, sound bites or tidbits that I do, makes me rethink, or, have a different perspective. It sort of builds, the ideology, a little step deeper. So thank you guys. It's helpful.
That's awesome. There's our listener right there, our one and only listener.
No, I must say it's been fun for me being able to scratch that particular itch within Bitcoin, business focused, macro focused. Obviously, I do that from time to time here on TFTC. Rabbit Hole Recaps, much more technically focused. And so it has been fun. We've been doing it since what, May, June? 6 months in?
Yeah.
Almost 6 months in?
Yeah, I've learned something new. I think that one of the coolest parts, I think where people appreciate, and we're probably going to have to go back and listen to certain ones like on the Trust, is like the McClintocks and Gavin Furies. It's like only if you've been around long enough, these guys are out there and they're just like at the top of their game in the traditional world. And then they found Bitcoin and now they're just like merging it together. And it's awesome to see. And then awesome to partner because then it just helps you from a professional sense leapfrog. Because having those like experts are huge in this industry, specifically legal. Like you don't have a good lawyer in this space, you're kind of, going way off the, wrong path or against the current.
Yeah, that might be the thing we've stumbled into with the last trade is that like we've been able to bring in professionals who are at the top of their game, who have found Bitcoin and have gone deep on Bitcoin and are just they're doing their thing in the Bitcoin world. And these are voices that you don't hear from a ton normally on your typical Bitcoin podcasts. And so talking about like revocable and irrevocable trust setups and, why they're important for Bitcoiners to be thinking about now rather than 5 years from now, that's a topic that isn't really out there enough. And so, being able to bring in an expert on that, McClintock, and make a whole show about it, I think has been valuable to our listeners.
Yeah. And it's been fun to see who it brings out of the woodwork, the people that reach out and say, hey, I listen to your pod. It's pretty crazy. I mean, I've experienced that throughout the years with TFTC and RHR, but I think the last trade has expanded that universe to an even wider audience, which is cool to see.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job hosting it, Marty, so thank you.
That was going to be my next question. Are you guys thinking about replacing me at any point soon?
If
we can get Logan. Yeah, maybe if we can get Logan instead of you.
Logan, you up for it?
It's funny if Marty, I don't know what we would do. Part of going into this, there's strategic reasons, business reasons, and all of that. And it was the commitment, but it really has been fun because you take all the pressure off. You're a master at managing the conversations, and we just get to come in and talk about stuff. But it's been almost cathartic, to just go and just to have a conversation about Bitcoin every week. So yeah, it's been fun. You've done a good job. We'll keep you around.
All right. Good to know. I'm going to tell my wife. One job secured. One of the many. We're not here to talk about the last trade. We're here to talk about the big announcement. Obviously, we're here with Michael and Jesse from Onramp. We've also got Mitch Kochman from BitGo with us. You guys have been working on something pretty big behind the scenes. This is the announcement episode for that, which is coming out alongside a bunch of PR and I'm sure a bunch of other events that are happening in Vegas next week and for months to come. What have you guys been working on?
Yeah, we have been. I'll start it off, and Michael, you can jump in whenever, and we can just tag team it here. We have been working on a suite of products centered around multi-institution custody. So at Onramp, we've been focused on for the last year building out a best-in-class solution for multi-institution custody. And we are now in a new era, we believe at Onramp, we're in a new era of Bitcoin custody because to date, there's been self-custody and third-party custody, and they each have their pros and cons. With self-custody, you can have outstanding security, but there are certain technical challenges and operational challenges involved in maintaining that security and setup. With third-party custody, you're trusting an institution unilaterally. They control your coins. And we've seen with FTX and Prime Trust and Fortress Trust and the whole long line of prior failures that sometimes that trust is misplaced because sometimes they're rehypothecating your Bitcoin or they haven't actually set up security with best practices and get hacked. So there are risks there. And now with multi-institution custody, it leverages the excellent security of multi-sig. And instead of having a multi-sig arrangement where you hold all of or the majority of the keys, it's institutions holding the keys on your behalf as a client. And Onramp coordinates that and has partnered with the best Bitcoin custody companies in the world, BitGo being one of them, and our infrastructure partner as well, in order to have a multi-institution custody setup where keys are held by Onramp, BitGo, CoinCover, or Kingdom Trust as the third. And 2 of 3 of those keys are needed in order to control the assets in the client's vault. And the client is the only one with the authority to request a transaction, and each of those institutions that ends up signing that transaction has to verify with the end client through their specific processes that this is a valid transfer request. And so now that opens up a whole new world of products that are all based on multi-institution custody, because in the spring at the start of this year we launched a a simple spot Bitcoin fund that used this multi-institution custody model for how we were custodying the Bitcoin. And we found that there was a lot of interest, a lot of demand for other types of Bitcoin products, specifically custody. So for people who already have Bitcoin, whether that's individuals or institutions or corporate treasuries, that are looking for perhaps a better form of custody or to diversify how they're holding their coins. Multi-institution custody is attractive to them, and now we have a product that meets those needs and is designed specifically for that use case. In addition to that, we also have a private wealth offering and have figured out how to meet the needs of RIAs in terms of providing a Bitcoin turnkey asset management platform that incorporates the on-ramp way, the on-ramp approach to how we're managing Bitcoin assets, and also focusing on Bitcoin only specifically. And yeah, so that's the set of products that we have announced today or yesterday, and we're here to talk about them.
Yeah, I think maybe there's a few things. I think where it relates to BitGo and Mitch, and there's a lot of incredible things that have just been happening behind the scenes. And we had Mitch on the last trade, and so the order is going to get a little clunky, but we're recording and launching Onramp and these new products on Thursday morning, and the last trade will come Friday. So if you're interested in learning more, that'll be there. But to Jesse's point, and we kind of glossy over this because it's really not from a Bitcoin standpoint, but it's really like foundational and part of the market structure is just a pooled asset vehicle, which is effectively what we first started in the spot Bitcoin trust. Even ahead of this BlackRock ETF and similar model, grantor trust, with a couple key things that we felt were necessary and that the market, we've had a lot of inbound requests for it, is effectively a Bitcoin only asset management firm for a number of reasons that this audience knows why is important. But then also the custody model, not being having a single point of failure, and then also allowing for delivery of the BTC. And so we have that fund. When we launched, we had a lot of demand internationally, along with domestically, for the fund products, international fund custody, but then also just additional private wealth services to really help from a core Bitcoin way of like, how do you get access to private deals, to inheritance planning, revocable trust, and all the things we've grown over our network, and can help play quarterback for somebody that's holding substantial wealth, along with what Jesse alluded to is the RIA offering to basically be a partner. And it's really interesting because these things existed. There's a lot of firms out there that help and provide like the industry parlance is TAMP, or turnkey asset management program. But what we're doing, we're taking the on-ramp approach, is one, offering Bitcoin only, two, offering it with the best qualified custody and insurance with BitGo and execution. But then three, really marrying in what we found as part of our core like offering. It's not a product, but it's ultimately turned into is our research and content arm, which is really led by Jesse, Brian Cabellas, Jackson contributes, and then the terminal that we recently launched to help asset allocators really look at and just understand what the hell is happening here in Bitcoin and why it's tied to foundational fundamentals. And so we're pulling all that together to offer this multi-institutional approach from the ground up. But what really is exciting, and we could probably like throw it to Mitch after sharing this, is that when we were working with BitGo, the initial approach, and that we did, and this is part of BitGo's core services and best in class tooling, is they participate in holding a key and then open up their platform for others to do similar models to this if they want, or they can set up an exchange and manage their keys in certain ways with really good tooling of how do you like manage the whole process. But BitGo saw what we were doing and really leaned into the fact that what if we created this model, but every institution had their own onboarding and authentication process before ever signing and going into that deep cold storage to move the funds. And so that was always our core vision. But the reality is you need partners to make it part of the reality, because it requires operational, like not only chops, best in class, but then it just has to be like infrastructure set up for that. And so that's where we're, I think, most excited, is this underpinning is foundational for all financial products we'll offer. We're starting with these 3 core, but then ultimately we see this stemming. But it's this idea that we onboard an individual and then we get them onboarded through their unique process to Onramp and BitGo's partnership to get them onboarded with BitGo. And the wallets are built and we can help with execution, or we can hand that off depending if you already have BTC. And then you just get to decide based on your jurisdiction if you want your recovery agent, your backup agent to be in the US or outside of the US. But then at the end of the day, anytime you want to move, withdraw, or participate in your asset, in your custody, it requires you to come to Onramp, and then would require you also to go to BitGo and go through their best-in-class authentication and trust processes before assets would ever even start to, the movement of assets would begin. And so that's where we're really excited. And maybe I'll let Mitch jump in to kind of share a little bit of that.
I'll first highlight a little bit more of what you were talking about at the end there, of like, it's important for us to try to get across to the market, like, what this solves for, of the rehypothecation scenario of FTX having paper Bitcoin and people ending up with a zero because they thought they had Bitcoin on FTX and it was double counted for and not there. That is not possible if when Bitcoin is deposited into an on-chain vault that is controlled by 2 of 3 institutions, and each institution needs the authorization from the end client in order to move those funds, to sign for those funds, then the end client ends up controlling that. And so you cannot lend out that Bitcoin and rehypothecate it like FTX did in that scenario. So you've protected against, one of the big problems that we've seen with Bitcoin custodians over the last decade, by having this setup that puts the power back in the end user's control. And ultimately it's about, making sure that client assets are sitting in an on-chain vault until the client tells multiple institutions that they want that money moved. And until then, it's going to sit there in an on-chain vault.
Yeah, BitGo. We've been in the industry for 10 plus years. We've had some great Bitcoiners work on our Bitcoin wallet, from Jameson Lopp to Brandon Black, and ultimately we made the decision that it's great being able to secure the assets that we do, with our hot wallets and our cold storage, but we wanted to open up our wallets and let companies like Onramp build great products and services, really based with our wallets and our key signing technology as the foundation. So, when we're talking about us signing a transaction, what does that entail? Once, user has, confirmed with Onramp and Onramp has signed a transaction, Onramp then goes and tells us, BitGo, we have a half signed transaction here. What we're doing is we're accepting a partially signed Bitcoin transaction, PSBT. We've invested pretty heavily in our Bitcoin wallets to be able to do that. We're accepting that half signed transaction, and then we, the way that key is held, you've got an arm guard in front of a bank grade vault, where then once your admin policies have been adhered to, once we get that notification from Onramp to go sign the transaction, we then video verify end user and customer of Onramp. Once we get that confirmation, we go into the vault. That key that we are holding is sharded multiple times. Different people have access to different shards. Once each of those shards gets signed, keys are reconstituted. BitGo will make the signature, and transaction will get broadcasted out to through our Bitcoin nodes and onto the blockchain. So it's a pretty intensive process, but the process that assets that are worth the amount that we all envision and believe they will be, we treat them with the the standard and care that they demand.
Yeah, it's a pretty involved process, but I think it's important to dig into why it's important to have these layers of involvement, both from the on-ramp verification to the signing of your part of the PSBT to then handing it over to BitGo and having them go through their process to complete the transaction and broadcast it to the network. What type of benefits does this provide the end user that you guys are targeting?
I think from a layman perspective, we can go into the nuance. It's basically like the three, whatever the person's best three companies, let's pretend Coinbase is the standard, right? Michael Saylor holds his Bitcoin there. You effectively get three Coinbases. There's processes behind every authentication before keys are ever signed and moved. And so ultimately, like I always think about your audience, Marty, and there's a lot of folks that are holding keys and doing a lot of things that would never use something like this. Where I always think about this is the product for my mother-in-law or the friend that has not been able to get in the space because they've been concerned with, well, what if they go under? What if they rug me? What if they rehypothecate the collateral? And all of these things that we're talking about, from redundancies to fault tolerance, or how we thought about building up this business, so we can get the trade-offs of both sides of, okay, I'm not ready to take self-custody. I'm not ready to learn the different aspects of it, but I'm also not ready to trust a single custodian. Is there a better way that I can get material allocation without feeling like what's happened? Basically, we keep saying the past 12 months. It's really the past 15 years. You can go all the way back to Gox, Quadriga, all the different exit scams. Like, people inherently understand like there's something, wrong with a central entity holding the asset. It's just like, well, what is the solution? And we feel like we're onto something with being able to solve for this.
Yeah, and to spell that out, like there's two types of people. There's people who understand and have done their homework and are technical enough to be confident with a self-custody setup. And if that's you, awesome. And if you're listening to this, frankly, that's probably you. Like, you have the chops, you've done the homework, and you can handle your own self-custody. And that's fantastic security. But for a lot of people, the barrier to entry for self-custody is daunting, and you can screw it up. And it also you can be deterred from taking on a Bitcoin allocation because you hear about how you have to have multiple hardware wallets set up and they're supposed to talk to each other in some weird way, and it sounds like a bunch of homework. It sounds like a major technical project to dig into, and so you just put it off and you decide, what, maybe Bitcoin's not for me. And I think that's most people. That's most people who don't have Bitcoin today, certainly. And as a result of that, a lot of people haven't taken the dive into Bitcoin and gotten an allocation. So there's people who are capable of self-custody, and great. If that's you, fantastic. And then there's the people who default to a third-party custodian, whether that's leaving their coins on Coinbase, whether they think, what, GBTC is the right thing for me. But that also includes a huge group that just decides, what, I'm not capable of self-custody, and these other custodians like FTX scare me. And so as a result, I'm just not going to touch Bitcoin. And I think that our solution, the Onramp multi-institution custody model, provides the ease for investors and whether that's individuals or institutions, the ease of third-party custody, but the security of a best-in-class multi-sig self-custody approach. And that's specifically because in the Onramp multi-institution custody model, Onramp and none of the entities involved have unilateral control over your coins. And so ultimately you retain control. And that it solves for the Achilles heel of the third-party custodian model, where, because they can be rehypothecated, because they sit in a specific entity's control, they can be hacked, and you can lose your funds as the end user. This model solves for that. So it opens up Bitcoin allocations to a huge group of people, individuals and institutions who have to date not been willing or able to take on Bitcoin as an asset because they are unprepared for self-custody and they find third-party custody unpalatable.
And so from the end user's perspective, I think it's pretty obvious that this is an optimal custody solution in terms of trade-offs. You're distributing risk, key risk among multiple institutions. If one goes down, you're not shit out of luck. The other two can move your Bitcoin. You can reset up the multi-sig quorum with another key agent. I think another question, which we didn't touch on the last trade and probably is important to touch on here, going to the other side of that market, like the key agents, what gives them confidence to participate in this type of quorum? There's probably many out there who fancy themselves as very good security engineers and they've created a robust custody solution in-house. What would make them confident that they should enter into a multi-institution quorum like this? And I'll throw that to you, Mitch.
I think it's, I think if you're, a Bitcoiner or someone who's paying attention to this industry, I don't know how you can look at multi-institution custody and not think that this is the future of custody. Ultimately at BitGo, we made the decision to support this stuff because, our CEO, Mike Belshi, was the person who pioneered using, multi-sig for Bitcoin wallets. And, the sort of applauding and, enabling, innovation using multi-sig, how could we not help lift these companies up and support them? And, if we fundamentally think that, this could be, the future of custody, and I personally, do believe so, how do we not support that model? That's a model that we absolutely, need to make sure that BitGo is also a part of. I think it's important to us that, as this gets built out, BitGo's been doing this for 10 years. We are very, very good at, keeping keys safe. We have not had a security incident, over the course of our lifetime. Ensuring that safety and that, all, that decade of work goes into, these models, and, they're done as securely as possible to ensure that, we get this right the first time. I think that was important to us. Ultimately, while we're all companies, we're all trying to make money, I think doing, bringing trust to digital assets is what we, from a company, value standpoint, that's number one. And I think, we're adhering to that ethos with what we're doing here. And, if this is the future, let's make sure that's done securely.
Yeah, and there's this real recognition that this opens up a large pool of capital. Like, I can't help because I'm, been listening to this pod, TFTC, for 5-6 years, and put my like freak hat on and be like, man, this doesn't sound right. Like, I can hold my keys. And I think that while that's true, there's a case for, the price appreciating and being a little worried about that. Let's put that one aside. And to just think through from like an institutional allocator or somebody that's high net worth that is just generally used to their worldview is that if I buy something, it doesn't go away, it doesn't go to zero. It's not going to, if somebody hacks my account because I'm a boomer and they get in, it just gets reversed. I just press a button and then I call them and they reverse the charge. And we just have been building and been in this space. Jesse's been running a fund. He's been writing for close to half a decade. I've been building in the space for close to half a decade and working and seeing all these conversations. You start to realize there's like pattern recognition in this conversations in individuals' heads as they look at it at this asset. And so we put this together because we believe it to be right and what's needed to unlock capital. But something happened like close to a month or 2 months ago where we had been working based on what the market wanted, the feedback on other vehicles, because that's ultimately what we're doing is we built an asset management platform with a trusted brand. We're aiming to build trust in the industry by providing content and research and advisory services to the market. And then it's built on the foundation of a better form of custody to reduce counterparty risk. And so while we were looking at that, then it's like, well, what are the vehicles that can unlock large pools of capital that has historically not come in and then are looking to come in, but pause because of all the FTX things that happen, and that will be ready, but they need to feel comfortable with it. And so we started and we found, again, the fund aspect, because some people just need security exposure versus spot for a number of reasons we can talk about if we need to. And then there's spot Bitcoin, and that spot Bitcoin could be for an individual as well as other exchanges who we brought on a few clients that we can talk about as well. And then on the wealth side, whether it's a private wealth individual or somebody that's an RIA that needs exposure to all of this. Where that ties in is we had a large pension intermediary that I feel comfortable in talking about because he came on the last trade, Clinton Cameron from Cartwright. And this individual and his boss are very knowledgeable in traditional finance. They're asset managers. They've been in the financial industry for, I think, close to 30 plus years. They were part of the 2008 crisis. They looked very deeply at, first principles thinking of what's going on, and they were gold guys. They found Bitcoin. And so they're very educated, and they're in a position where they're talking to pensions, but they're looking for a counterparty that they can in good faith go to. And again, not sharing anything that wasn't already said on a pod, I would really encourage, if any of this is interesting, to listen to that podcast. I think it was like 3 episodes ago on the last trade, but it was just awesome because we hadn't announced these products. We were just working on them with the vision that this is what the market wanted. And he reached out because he actually happened to be a freak, and the algorithm on YouTube put the last trade in front of him. And so we got on and he starts talking about the last trade and loving the content, but then went into what he's looking for. And he can't work with anybody because of all of the tenets and pillars that we're focused on when it comes to Bitcoin only, and just understanding that like his core thesis is like, how can you work with somebody if they don't fully understand why Bitcoin is the asset? Because then that just signals other misunderstandings. And if you're ultimately going to be a fiduciary, how comfortable can you be in parking your capital? And then the other aspect is obviously the counterparty risk. So these are pensions. This is large swaths of capital into the tunes of multiples of billions of dollars if this go, whoever takes on their capital. So that's big. But then last is in-kind delivery. And again, from a very first principles, it's not that he wants the Bitcoin. It's that he understands that at a time of need, like a GFC, you're going to want the Bitcoin. You're going to want to prove that your counterparty has it. And he's just thinking, why wouldn't you be able to take it? You could take my money in, you could take my BTC in. Why can't you give it back out? And so he came to us basically with a problem, not a solution. He said, this is what I'm looking for. And we're like, well, yeah, I mean, this is our core foundation of how we're thinking about it. And so anyway, that was a long way of basically saying that's where I'm really excited. We're really excited about this, is because we've just had this vision of the future of what we've been doing and building in this space. And it's been fun to see organically people come and reach out looking at that same vision, which is an educated person. And so I think as the market gets more and more educated, as we've seen, these products start to make more and more sense, because the old world of doing things clearly doesn't work, as we've seen the past, again, 12 months or 15 years of this like central entities holding all the assets and just trusting them to like be whole when you need your Bitcoin.
Yeah. I think Michael's right here that this may sound like a crazy new half-baked idea to some people listening. But the more you think about it, the more time you spend in it, thinking about how this unlocks huge pools of capital that have previously found Bitcoin inaccessible or not willing to go there. You start to realize that this is how Bitcoin goes through the next phase of the adoption curve. We've bootstrapped from nothing to a $500 billion asset. To match gold would be a $12 trillion asset. Obviously, we all know that there's a lot of potential beyond just matching gold. And so, any way you cut it, we're early on in that adoption curve. And that means the bulk of the adoption curve is still ahead, and all those adopters are still ahead. And how do we cross the chasm from the very technical, people who are capable of setting up their own multi-sig, and listening to TFTC as a result of being very technical early freaks? How do you go from those folks to the mainstream, to the institutional capital allocators, the investment committees, where they've got 7 people sitting on an investment committee? They can't touch Bitcoin because, 1, they don't want to be in GBTC. And 2, if they're going to do self-custody, who's going to hold the keys? You got 7 people. Who's going to set it up? like that's some of the problems that are out there that for Bitcoin to continue to mature as an asset have to be solved. And they're solved by making security and ease come together. And that's what multi-institution custody is able to do. And it's possible because of, Marty, to your question earlier, of like our key agent partners and infrastructure partner BitGo, recognizing that this is an important new wave of how Bitcoin custody can and will be done, and leaning into that. And so, we owe a big thanks to Mitch and his team at BitGo for recognizing, they're steeped in 10 years of learning about Bitcoin custody and multi-sig from the very beginning, and realize that this is an important new chapter in how Bitcoin custody can be done for some people. And it's not the right solution for everybody, but I think increasingly it will become a bigger and bigger part of how people who, capital that has yet to come into Bitcoin finds its way into Bitcoin, and specifically finds its way into the right ways of holding Bitcoin, the ways, the type of, like our fund where you can take in-kind redemptions instead of like the BlackRock ETF where certain people can take in-kind redemptions and that can always change, or GBTC where nobody can take in-kind redemptions. And so, we're excited about what this unlocks for the market, for the capital allocation landscape, and really, really appreciative of Mitch and all of his work and his team's work for helping make it possible.
I appreciate it. I mentioned on the last trade, but I think we have an asset here that it was a blog I read by you guys that the risk is not just the asset price going to zero, but fundamental loss of the asset. Private keys being lost, and your balance goes to zero, even if Bitcoin is appreciating in value. And in order to onboard these people who are on the sidelines, you need to build for for that risk and to reduce that counterparty risk. Our CEO Mike Belshi at Pacific Bitcoin a couple weeks ago said, right now we're built for securing billions and billion-dollar wallets. And in the next market cycle, in the next few market cycles, we need to be ready for trillion-dollar wallets. And there's work that needs to be done to get there. And personally, I believe that multi-institution custody and what we can do here is fundamentally better from a counterparty risk perspective, and will help unlock the capital that ultimately gets us to trillion-dollar wallets. So I thank you guys for setting the foundation to go make that a reality.
I like this meme, trillion-dollar wallets. It just sounds good.
Meme it into reality here.
There's a theme that you said meme theme. We were talking about the early part of the pod. I think one of the things that makes Last Trade really special is bringing different ideas that haven't really been talked about. And there's this quote, I knew it was somewhere, I looked it up. It's so the engine of human progress and prosperity has been when ideas have sex with each other. When the different ideas have sex with each other.
Who said that? Who said that?
It's there's different flavors of this, right? It's Matt Ridley, but I just remember that was like one of the more like kind of prolific or get people's engines humming. But I've always thought like there's lots of things. Like me and Jesse have different styles, and that's different ideas. There's BitGo and Belshi being a technologist, and then also using the core, but then understanding Bitcoin, which are two different ideas. But one that I think is really misunderstood or not really quantified, and it's such a huge opportunity for anybody listening, is while funds and asset management and all this stuff isn't sexy, it's literally been around for thousands of years, or at least like asset management and banking and all those things, and then funds for however long. But the problem is that all these people that have come in are like crypto people. So they don't get it. And so they either sell you a bunch of things that aren't Bitcoin, and you can go to websites and see Solana, DEX, top 10, metaverse, down 80%, and they have the gall to like still sell you it, and like they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and they have a Bitcoin fund, but that gets a little percentage, whatever. And then they can't really educate you properly, even if they wanted to, or even if they understood, because when the market turns against them, there's nobody there to like say, hey, like, let's walk through what's happening. It wasn't Bitcoin, it was FTX, because they put them in FTX, they put them in Solana. So that's just a problem in itself, that most of the crypto people that understand funds and traditional finance ended up in crypto. And then the other side of this, and this is the shout out to our good friend Odell and the freaks, it's like, fuck those people. Like, I want nothing to do with that. I don't want anyone holding my keys. I don't want any of it, which is perfectly fine. The problem is that like, that's not how all the money's going to come in if we just ready that or don't develop the products and solutions. And this is the sex of ideas of like, we're core, Marty's one of them. And like, you go through these progressions, you either get left behind or not left behind, but you either just like stay in certain camps, or you continue to like grow with the trajectory of these things. And I won't lump Marty there, but I feel like Jesse and I would anchor to that of like, you know, Mitch talked about it. He was an early CASA client on the previous pod. And like, that's part of the pattern recognition and understanding of how hard this was. And does it have to be hard for his mother and other people to get exposure to this asset? So I think that's ultimately what we're doing here, is taking the fundamental understanding of Bitcoin, how we think it will scale, reducing counterparty risk, but then taking the traditional world of asset management and the vehicles that are needed from an international perspective or domestic US perspective, and marrying them together to provide the products that don't blow up and people get burned.
Yeah. No, I mean, the whole meme, like Bitcoin's not for everyone, has never really set well with me. I really like to anchor to, as long as you have the optionality and we're sufficiently distributed at the node level, the hash rate level, and the key level, that all will be fine. It's an open source protocol. People have different preferences. They have different levels of risk tolerance. They're going to interact with Bitcoin in different ways, whether we like it or not. And again, since it's an open source protocol, any of this is possible. You just have to accept that as fact. And going back to Bitcoin isn't for everyone meme, like it's never sat well with me, because I do think if we have the best money that's ever been created in human history, we should try to get it into as many hands as possible, despite the limitations at the protocol level, despite the limitations of the infrastructure at any given point in time. Our North Star should be trying to get it into as many hands as possible, and creating unique solutions like multi-institution custody gets us closer to that. And then obviously we still have limitations at the protocol level and second layers that we need to figure out, but I'm confident over time, as we reach those limits, people will find creative ways. Maybe they'll have ideas having sex or something like that, and they'll figure out how to scale this at the tech level as well.
Yeah, Bitcoin is for everyone. It's just maybe not the purest form of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is for everyone. It just depends on when you get into it and what kind of tooling exists at that point in time. As things keep getting better in how user-facing apps and products are set up, it gets easier and easier to interact with Bitcoin in some capacity, right? Like, you can have exposure to Bitcoin without ever really using on-chain. And then it becomes a purist question of like, is that truly using Bitcoin? Does that mean you're a Bitcoiner? And it's a valid point that like, you can have a definition of being a Bitcoiner that does not include that. And I think that's totally valid. But you can still have access. People who are not quote unquote purist Bitcoiners can still have access to Bitcoin and use it in some capacity. And I think that trend will continue to evolve. And frankly, it's part of how this asset wins. It's by penetrating the adoption curve that this thing becomes the de facto money for the world. And then the future version of the world that we all hope for flows from that. And so I think adoption through better tools and products, and easier to use tools and products, is how we get to that end state of Bitcoin as a unit of account, that everything's priced in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the savings vehicle for everyone. So this is part of that journey.
I think Bitcoin is not for everyone today, but we need to build the world that Bitcoin can be for everybody when they need it to be.
Well said, yeah.
And it's up to us to build the products and services that are there for for people when they're ready, to go make that leap. And whether it's self custody or multi institution custody or really whatever we haven't even thought of yet. We've got to make this easier for people, and until it is, we're not going to reach that point of hyper Bitcoinization that ultimately we're all hoping for and excited for.
Yeah, I can hear many of the freaks clamoring right now. The biggest risk, if we're putting our adversarial thinking caps on and really trying to poke holes in this, is yes, you may have multi-institution custody. Key risk is distributed amongst those institutions, but at the end of the day, if the state comes, it goes to those institutions and says, hey, you can't move this Bitcoin out. You guys are going to have to abide by that mandate, which gets into the whole idea of multi-jurisdictional, multi-institution, multi-sig custody. So with that in mind too, I mean, how, Michael, I know you've thought through this. Like, how do you approach that and steelman that argument?
Yeah, I mean, this is my favorite topic because it's my favorite topic on the Bitcoin side because, or just in general, one, because I'm convinced after like thinking about this, and we've onboarded a lot of folks into the custody and talked through it, that there's no perfect solution to Bitcoin. There's just like perfect trade-offs, and those are different for every individual. And this like whole concept that there is like custody and is always moving for an individual just based on what's the allocation size, the price, the risk factors, and all of these things. So there's never like the right form of custody. It can always change. There's a few different ways to answer. Like one is if there's something jurisdictionally happening and you're already working with an institution, you're probably, already been rugged because that single institution has failed you. I think there's another understanding that's important about self-custody is the thing that keeps everybody honest. So this ability to have a valve that you can take delivery, whether it's to test the system or to take it. There's jurisdictional keys that will ultimately happen. CoinCover's a partner. They sit in the UK. They're incredible. There will be others. But where I think this is like the less maybe PC or like where this all goes. And it's kind of been something that's fascinating. And we need to, I need personally to read more about it, is like this whole free banking concept. And there's free banking, and I guess it can mean a lot of things. I ultimately think it means like trust and confidence, which we're ultimately trying to build here at Onramp. I think we're doing a pretty good start from the feedback we've gotten. But it's ultimately that like people fulfill their obligations, and what are their obligations in a future state? And one of them might be that they're going to sign no matter what, and that's what's valuable. And so I think that's where this all ends up, is it all comes down to incentives. And if your incentive is to do it, and we talked about it on the last trade, and we've talked to investors about this, about, it's a common thing that's come up historically since, been in this industry of like, what about nation state and, adoption? It's like, that's a problem, but that's also why we're based here in Texas, because Texas has a certain stance on property rights. And I've actually had institutions reach out after that. It's like, hey, can you send me some of the material to explain a little bit more about the property rights? Because one of the things we cited was just, Kyle Bass and pulling the $1 billion plus in gold bullion for UTEMCO down from New York to the first sovereign state bullion depository in North America here in North Austin. And so ultimately, I think that's where it all ends up. It ends up as jurisdictions, trusted, and then ultimately counterparties that sit in those jurisdictions that are just known to fulfill the obligations. And the ones that don't, they're the same ones that end up getting rugged and don't fulfill the obligation, whether it's because they're insolvent, didn't deliver. And that's how the market determines who are the counterparties. BitGo's been around for 10 plus years because they continue to sign, they continue to do things, and there's other institutions like that. And so I think that's the long term answer, is the firm that sets themselves up from the game theory and always fulfills will be the long standing firm. And that's also why it's important to only hold one key.
Yeah. And to add on to that, Marty, of like sort of addressing the hypothetical directly of, so, in that scenario, let's say let's say you've got your 3 institutional key holders, and let's say they all happen to be in the same state or something like that, and state or federal regulators come and say, give us those keys now. That's a risk, right? Like that's a risk with the current like third-party custody setup where a single institution holds all the keys, and so that's a risk right now. If you had all of your key holding entities in the same jurisdiction, that's a risk with multi-institution custody. However, it does require coordination across time, right? Like that action has to happen on the same day, effectively. And that makes it harder, right? Like that requires a greater coordination for law enforcement, or regulators, or whatever agency is acting here. So that right there is like an order of magnitude harder, just to make sure that you've got all that happening at the same time, all your ducks in a row in terms of your paperwork, and you act at the same moment in time, right? Like a raid happening in 3 different locations at the exact same time. That's harder than sending a letter saying, "Hey, we're your regulator. Send us your assets," to a singular third-party custodian. And then, of course, when we add in that jurisdictional layer, it becomes an order of magnitude harder beyond that. So, 100 times harder than a third-party custodian holding all the assets, because now you have to coordinate across time and across jurisdictions, meaning you have to have an action at the same hour of the same day by multiple different authorities acting in several different jurisdictions. And so you can see how it's still possible, but it's so much harder to execute that kind of action, by the state or by federal governments, than it is with a single custodian holding the keys to all the Bitcoin, where all it takes is a letter from a regulator saying, "Hey, we need that, give it to us," and they have to comply.
Yeah, I think that's actually, it reminds me, it's not apples to apples, but of the block size subsidy debate, or like that we need inflation or tail emission, in the sense of, again, not apples to apples, but it's very similar in the sense like engineering around something that we haven't seen. Not to say that it can't happen. What we've seen more of is exchanges, again, go down, be insolvent, all the things we know. So you want, to Jesse's point, a step function increase in security to prevent that. And that's where you have the keys outside and not a single institution holding all of them. But it's the same concept of like, if you get too cute or too complex, complexity is the enemy of security. And if you do too much crazy stuff with your multi-sig setup, that's how funds get lost. And so I do think there's a natural balance, and there again is no perfect solution. There's just perfect trade-offs. And I think this this model is form fit for that. And then ultimately will increase as you think about, and Mitch can talk to some of the work they're doing, with time locks, when that's really built out. I still think it's early. I think a lot of that stuff is like multi-sig in 2018 and 19 personally. But then I think the quorum size and the participation from the entities, and a lot of things will develop over time. But when you think about what is the natural spot, and I think Logan had pulled it up earlier, of that reducing friction and counterparty risk while increasing security, and that's where we really like this model, at least for the foundation to start Onramp.
I just really to piggyback here, because I mostly agree with both of you guys, and also we get this question a lot at BitGo, is primarily the market's shown us that the biggest issue that we have to secure against is the loss of funds. We have not seen on great scale nation states seizing assets from citizens with Bitcoin. Obviously in history it has happened, but I think first and foremost protecting against those security concerns is the priority. I think you guys have the right mindset to focus. Ultimately this is phase 1. I can absolutely see phase 2, 3 splitting between jurisdictions, and building out this product and watching it evolve. But as obviously Bitcoiner, but I've got libertarian ideals, and I'm cautious about this stuff as well. And I think if obviously custody is a spectrum, and if this is concern number one for you, then self custody probably is the route for you. If you want you don't want the concerns of self custody, then you look at the range of custody options as being one of them. But ultimately, like at least my individual opinion here is, I don't think we're anywhere close to the U.S. government seizing this stuff overnight. I think government, and particularly the U.S. government, tends to operate a bit slowly. You see that with anything from regulation in this country to liquidation of assets and things like that. Like, it's slow, it's purposeful for a reason. It's to make sure like their decisions matter. They're careful about it, and I don't necessarily think you're going to have 2 hours to go withdraw your Bitcoin, and move it offline. If there ever was some sort of issue, I think we're gonna have some time to prep for that reality. I mean, look at what's going on with the ETF right now. we all are of the mindset that approval's coming soon. Everyone's looking at those January dates. We're gonna get to it when the infrastructure is right, and it's not going to be a light switch event. So that's sort of, at least from individual perspective, what I think about that issue.
And that is a nod to self-custody, right? It's just like the fact that you can take delivery and it sits outside of the system always is that like question, if I am going to push draconian measures on a society or constituents, like, well, that is always your last, ditch effort, and you have to be prepared for it. I think what's more likely is you get a government-backed ETF that locks all the Bitcoin. that might be a more likely version of any kind of what we're talking about here with the confiscation or request to not sign or any of the things that are associated with like attacking Bitcoin. I
think ultimately though, like you mentioned the ETF again, like it's up to us as an industry to go build, the ETFs are going to be a great vehicle for a lot of people. And it's up to us to build the competitor, of why it makes sense to go with a model like multi-institution custody, where you have, more control of the assets, and explaining, why that matters. Because ultimately, if everyone just goes the ETF route, we have, digital gold, and that's great, and price goes up, but it's not fixing money. It's not really using the asset to what it was designed to be. So it's on us as an industry to provide those products and provide those options for users to hold their Bitcoin in ways outside of the ETF, and pitch that value prop.
Can we go out the box to have a conversation, Logan? I wanted to ask Marty. This is a key thing that comes up, and I know everybody gets it. It's like, but I'm going to ask Marty directly. Do you think we can outcompete BlackRock?
Well, it's funny you ask, because I was just about to bring that up. I do think we can. And building on part of the conversation we had on the last trade, it goes back to how effectively can we market this type of product to the market, to end users, and like front run them, like, and how quickly can we do it? Because I think all of us on this call would agree it's a step function improvement in terms of ways to get exposure to Bitcoin compared to an ETF, where you really just have an IOU on Bitcoin sitting in Coinbase's wallets, and you don't really even have, you just have like paper exposure at the end of the day. And it's been the meme on TFTC and RHR for years, is BTC is the ETF. Like, if you're going to get exposure, get direct exposure that gives you the ability to take custody. And I said this on the last trade after the Lightning Summit in July in Nashville. Like, I do think there is a strong case to be made that we should caution people away from the ETF, because yes, they may view it as this digital gold asset right now, but as we're seeing on the Lightning Network and other second layer solutions that are coming, and what we just launched at TFTC with our site with the Lightning monetization tools, like, you are actually going to want to use Bitcoin, and to do that is going to demand that you actually have the asset to send. You're not going to be paying Lightning invoices from a BlackRock ETF. So whether or not we can beat BlackRock in stewarding people towards products that'll give them that ability is a question yet to be answered. Whether or not we should is a definite yes. I am confident that via succinct, direct communication, we can beat BlackRock at this game.
I haven't said this out loud. I hope I don't get in trouble, Mitch. I asked it because I, in my bones, know that I'm not saying Onramp beats BlackRock, but the right solutions do, because ultimately it's basically betting on people being educated and getting educated. If everything stops today and all the information and all the writing and all the things everybody's producing and content stop, we probably don't. But as long as the market continues to get educated, and this is, again, just pattern recognition from before, BlockFi was the best example, rehypothecation, lending, the market started to price in what that means, is the same way that counterparty risk, taking delivery, and all of those things start to, disseminate to the market, get across. And then you start learning there's other solutions and you see the flow. It's just a free market. Bitcoin's the best money that's ever been created. The market is starting to coalesce around that in the same way that when you build better financial products, the market will go. And BlackRock probably doesn't get rugged at first. It's going to be these other like ETFs that are sitting on, maybe a different exchange, took a cut a corner, maybe rehypothecated the collateral. The part I was going to say about getting in trouble. So I don't think that's the ambitious part. I think the ambitious part was that, like, when we talked with Mitch and BitGo saw the vision, was excited. In my head, I was like, man, I wonder if they're like, these guys are going to compete with BlackRock on the fund. Cause we have ambitions for the fund. Like, the fund is very, like, people need that exposure. They want it. They don't want to go buy Bitcoin. They don't want to set up custody and authentication. They just want to click a button, it sit there, and that's perfectly fine. But then they're going to wake up one day and they're going to be like, I want the Bitcoin to pay Marty's paywall or the things that he's building at Mash. It's like, I need it. And so building the mechanism from, again, a first principles standpoint makes sense because it's a better product. Forget about like being tied to the Bitcoin ETH. It's just like, it's better. It can be done. There's precedent for this in the ecosystem, in the traditional financial ecosystem with gold and silver, amongst other commodities. And so it was this thought, well, like, if BitGo sees that, then like Coinbase right now, GBTC, 600K. If the ultimate winner's there, that's probably hundreds of thousands, not millions. But that's not the flow. You get the flow and the custody. It's, well, then where did people take the delivery? It's like, it's right there with BitGo. Like, you just like, you can offer a better product. So that, anyway, that was like when I first had this, like, what if that's like their angle or whatever? And then I know it wasn't, more than likely, but it's a very interesting, concept because I really think about GBTC holding 600K BTC, printing Bitcoin. Somebody's going to win that from a better product. And the price is only $25,000, $28,000, and they're holding 15 billion plus or whatever. What happens when it's 10x from that? That's somebody sitting on $150 billion in Bitcoin generating fees. That's the opportunity for that, just like one product.
Okay, on the question of like, are we going to contend? Are we going to beat BlackRock? Or, I think there's definitely space for both of us to play here. But, I think you can't work in this industry without, a bit of optimism. You could be trying to fix money, without optimism, without a bit of an edge to you. And I think as long as we harness that, as long as, like you said, with the social media and the memes, and as long as that continues, but, we've got to harness that to keep educating, doing the work that you guys do, with the research, with the terminal, and keep pushing that information out there, reaching more ears. I think, ultimately, I think the ETF is going to be for some people. That's great. I'm glad to have them on board in the way that, we can. But, ultimately, I do, the optimist in me is, believes that there will be, a second path for those who actually truly understand the asset and, want to leverage it to the capabilities that we can.
It's nice to see that my winner's mentality speech was embedded into you, Mitch.
Thank you.
I'm a serial optimist, so I just with I want to make sure we win, and it's not digital gold. It's more than digital gold. We fix money, and that's my mindset. And I think as long as we got great people like you guys, doing the hard work of effectively helping those people, we do win.
I didn't say before, Mitch, but I think that if Bitcoin makes it to digital gold, then it is almost certain to win by fixing money. Like, I think that path dependence of all it has to do is make it a little bit further, and then it's going to make it to the end, is there. So I don't know. I sort of view in a lot of my writing and what I try to focus on is like people need to view it as digital gold first. Like the people who don't yet have any Bitcoin and still think it's monopoly money, they just need to come around to this is digital gold and you're early. And then, come on into the tent. Like, whether that's, hopefully it's through a good Bitcoin vehicle. Hopefully it's by buying spot Bitcoin and holding it in an on-chain vault. That'd be ideal. If not that, hopefully it's through a good spot Bitcoin vehicle like the Onramp Bitcoin Trust. And, that even allows for some people who are going to get exposure via BlackRock, and they're going to start learning about Bitcoin and they're going to become bullish. Like, that can be the value proposition of BlackRock is orange pilling Wall Street to the extent that they have not. What was that, Marty?
Top of funnel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, top of funnel. Top of funnel, BlackRock helps. I think the real winners are going to be the people who don't get exposure via ETFs. So sort of doesn't flipping that from the perspective of like which company wins, it's which users win. The users who don't go in via an ETF are going to be the real winners, I think.
Yeah, it's why. I was to say it's why like nobody really says this, but it's like every company, if they're going to be successful, has to be an education company in this space for the next 10 years. Like you have to be able to educate and explain all these concepts on like why you don't want an ETF, right? Because everything from a pattern recognition from traditional finance is like, this is the easiest way to get it. And you got to get ahead of that and figure out the ways to articulate like, hey, this asset has other properties and you may want to, take delivery of it or need it. Because that's what
that's what I reference as the hard work. Is like you guys are having this conversation every day with new people entering the space. Like the company's name is Onramp. It's to Onramp to Bitcoin, and it's a privilege to enable you guys. But ultimately, like you said, you're going to be educating for 10 years. That's it's heavy stuff, but it's reality. And unless you got to keep throttling that, otherwise we're not going to win. So, there's a lot of work to do to go on ramp and onboard everybody to the industry. But, I do think we get there.
I'm 6 years into educating people on this show, and it's a drag. 10 more. It's not a drag. It's a labor of love, but it's
Marty.
It's a process. It takes showing up, being there. It's important, but it's fun. I got 10 more years left in me. If that's what we got to do.
Yeah.
It's also insanely rewarding. Like imagine like we all love this, no matter what we say. It's like,
it's true.
You talk about the conversations, Mitch, is like having thousands of conversations on like onboarding, consultations, conversions, like helping them move over. It's like never gotten tired of it because somebody's eyes are always like glimmer, like, what are we doing? Like we're taking possession, like we're taking money. The whole thing is just, it's like the thing, once you find it, you just latch on to it because it's what's going to give you the energy to get past all like the bullshit when it comes.
Yeah, that's the real Bitcoin dopamine hit. It's not the likes on Twitter. It's the aha moment going off in somebody else's eyes where you're like, yeah.
That's why Larry Lepard is so amazing because that's just like, he's a microcosm of like the generation that you get to see behind the scenes that see it. And there's just something magical about somebody that thinks that they saw everything in their life. Like it was it. And then they see this and it's like, oh my God, I have another like 30 years. I mean, the people that have reached out from TradFi that have like want to dust off their, what do they carry? Bookcases? What are the
briefcases?
Briefcases. Yeah. Yeah. They want to dust off
one of these bad boys.
Wow.
They want to dust off the briefcase and they're sitting there retired and they're just like, look, I know exactly how to position this for all the people that are looking. It's just been insane. It's really the ultimate signal for us as far as like the talent that's interested in jumping on board.
Yeah. A lot of those folks listen to your show, Marty. So they're listening to this right now and
Closet freaks.
Yeah, the closet freaks who have had a successful traditional professional career and think that Marty might be onto something here.
Yeah, they're all closet Alex Jones fans as well. I hear. I'm kidding. Kid.
When the price ran from 10 when it started moving, it was like the first nod my mother-in-law ever was like, maybe he's onto something. That was the most I got. And then the second one was when she saw the product, she's like, he might be onto something because I might use it. Or like it's something I would use. It's something I would use. Like that's the most you get.
Yeah, and that's part of where this all came from too. Is like, so I was running a crypto fund that I started in 2017 as a crypto fund because that's what I believed in at that point in time. Got my ass handed to me in 2018. Had to figure out, this is not about technology and all the crypto talking points. This is just about money. And then I had to learn about money for the first time, even though I have an MBA and I never learned about money. And then you end up as a Bitcoin maximalist. That's the path that everybody walks. That's the path that I walked. And so my fund became a Bitcoin holding fund. And my investors didn't need me to do that. So I told them, you don't need me to hold Bitcoin. You can take self-custody. A quarter of them did. 3/4 of them didn't. They didn't want to deal with it. A lot of them are boomers and they didn't want to deal with it. They wanted my conviction in their inbox every month, telling them why this is still a good thing to include in their portfolio. And that's the solution that we originally built, was for people like that, for the types of people like Michael's talking about here. His mother-in-law would fall into that sort of general category of like, they don't want to deal with it. They want exposure. They want somebody to set it up for them right, but they don't want to like wade into Bitcoin themselves. They're not ready for it yet. Maybe they get ready for it. And I think that's one of the funny things about Bitcoin is like, to do it right, you have to learn a ton. But when you're just starting, you're not going to learn. You don't know a ton. You've just begun. So how do you get started right? How do you find the right on-ramp into this asset class that allows you to keep learning with a Bitcoin-only educational focus and enables you to take on whatever self-custody choices you want in the future, because you can take in-kind redemptions from our on-ramp Bitcoin trust, and also helps you grow into this asset by helping you learn about the various idiosyncratic considerations around Bitcoin and all the financial services products that are tied in with that, and also helps you learn about the industry in general. Like, there's a lot to learn, and you just don't know that on day one. Like, there's no way to be prepared to set up self-custody right on day one. And so as a result of that, we have a lot of people sitting in GBTC, or millions of Bitcoin sitting on Coinbase. And thankfully that those numbers have been decreasing because frankly that there are enough people stacking sats, sucking that supply off of the exchanges and putting it into cold storage, which is a fantastic trend that's happening. And hopefully vehicles like what Onramp has built enable that trend to continue, so that we're pulling supply off of exchanges and putting it into on-chain vaults, because that's how it should be done.
Yeah, just to double click, I like really underscoring that.
Can't believe you just said double click.
Double click on that, like really underscoring that anecdotally, like it's known in the industry that a lot of people coming in are exit liquidity. Like when the market's flying, you buy and then you're just selling and you're burned for the next cycle because you're like, what did I do? Why did I do it? And either there's lots of reasons. We don't have to go. It could be, the wherever you bought didn't understand it and they were selling you something else. But it's ultimately when the price is moving against you is when you need the education the most, because we all know that's when, that's just standard, investment 101, right? You buy when everybody's selling, you sell whenever. It's like when the price cuts in half or by, 75% is ultimately at 16 or 17K with this recent all-time low or the low. And it was funny because I don't know if you remember, and I maybe won't call out the asset manager, but a large firm said, they're like smarts. Like, we don't need you guys for the research and advice and all the stuff thing. We need you guys to jump in and share stuff when the market's cutting in half. That we're not the only ones saying. like this thing. It's like helping our guys on the market goes. And if you think about it, it's very hard for people to do that because A, they either don't understand it, or B, they're selling people a bunch of other things. And so to be able to say, oh, this is why, and it's tied to these things, not Bitcoin, it just goes fundamentally against everything that they're doing. And so this is a real core tenet of our value prop, is the ability, and we're seeing it. It's almost like turning into a product. It isn't, but so many firms, exchanges, financial institutions are reaching out to us to partner on the education to either get it to their clients' hands or figure out to kind of like market, because it just helps in the adoption and ultimately the AUM, because the more people know about this, it's only one way. You start at a percent. And next thing you know, you're on a pod, you're running 2 pods and 10 businesses, and you just launched a media company because you're all in times 10.
Yeah. And that's actually one thing I wanted to bring up. I mean, we mentioned it on the last trade. It might be the phrase of the show, as we mentioned on the last trade, but like,
let's double click on that.
If not you, then who? Like, just from all three of you, like, how crazy does it feel to be working on these particular products at this particular point in time, considering where we were just 6 years ago? Like 6 years ago, I mean, famously couldn't get a job walking dogs for me personally. Jesse,
Mitch doesn't know that story.
Yeah, I didn't know that story either.
I was just fine as an IBMer 6 years ago, but what's the story?
I was woefully unemployed for about 18 months. I tried to jump from finance to tech. I got a job as a software sales guys, did good at that, but I really wanted to work up to the product management level of the tech industry. And I decided to quit the software sales job, thinking I was easily going to be able to find a product manager job. Apparently, if you've never built anything or led a team in tech, it's really hard to get a product management job. And so I didn't get one for like 18 months. This was in 2016 to 2017. I've got a finance background, an economics degree. I'm a pretty smart guy, I like to think. I got into Bitcoin in 2013, was staying up to date on everything that was going on there. And yeah, in 2017, like literally rock bottom, couldn't get a job in the tech industry. Had been unemployed for so long, and that gap in my resume where people were like, all right, what the fuck is wrong with you? Desperately went out to get a dog walking job, and I couldn't put the French Bulldog harness on the fake French Bulldog, so I did not get the dog walking job. I had to walk home.
What an amazing image right there, to be disqualified because of a mannequin French Bulldog.
It happened. And it was rock bottom for me. I walked home from Dumbo to Williamsburg with my head down low. Like, I have to go tell my wife I couldn't get a dog walking job. And I started the Bent the next week, and here we are today.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
At that point, like, if you were to tell 26-year-old Marty, who just failed at putting a harness on a fake dog, that we would be here right now working on the things that I'm working on personally, whether it's the media, the venture side of things, I would have been like, you're fucking crazy. But again, the newsletter started because it was like, everybody's texting me, emailing me, calling me, like, what's going on with Bitcoin? The price is going up. And I was like, all right, if you can't find information to better understand this, I'll go create it for you. That's how the newsletter started.
The amount of awkward Thanksgivings and family conversations you've had is just probably like insane.
Yeah. Yeah. My in-laws definitely think I'm crazy.
Sorry, Mitch.
Look, I'd say, you know, I told a little bit about sort of on the last trade, my Bitcoin story and how I ended up here. But, you know, ultimately, 2020, I was in Argentina when, world was collapsing. I had to get home, but I saw the impact of inflation there, and ultimately knew that day that I saw the value for Bitcoin and wanted to work in this industry. It wasn't until 2022, inspired by the Bitcoin conference. But the work that I get to, like you told me even a year ago, like this was the dream of doing the work that I do today, which is helping these companies push the industry forward and really set up the rails and make new change. That will, I believe, materially matter. It's like I'm so stoked to wake up every Monday morning and go work on this stuff. So, anyone listening that doesn't work in the industry, it's hard. It's hours. It's you never know who's going to blow up the next day. But ultimately, I wouldn't trade this for the world. And encourage if you're thinking about it, go try to make the leap.
You just try to work for BitGo. It's just as a nod. BitGo has been incredible to work with. Like I genuinely mean this. It reminds me of my days, a little bit Google, but mainly like as bad as the knock WeWork gets or got, they had the best human capital I'd ever worked with. And it makes sense if you think about like it was the hot thing. So it was pulling from traditional finance and traditional tech back in 17 and 18. And I just remember it was real world infrastructure, similar to like a BitGo. There's real infrastructure in place that were different than like a SaaS company or something that's just selling something that's more ephemeral. And this like culture and passion, which I would imagine translates from like a, Bitcoin ethos and the things that BitGo works on, just bred the engine of the company from crazy days, but it was like moving mountains because everybody was aligned. And every interaction that I've had with their team, from Mitch to Ping on the marketing side, across the board. So if anybody's looking to break into the space, I can't speak highly enough of like their team, and also just executing. It makes sense why they've been around for 10 plus years and are leading the way on a lot of this stuff.
I think appreciate that, but like largely, being in the industry for 10 years is going to attract top talent. Like we are not Bitcoin only. Personally, my views are, or at least Bitcoin first. I like innovation somewhere else. I'm not going to stop it, but I want to work on money here. But ultimately, like we get the privilege of hiring a lot of top talent who are great at what they do, and it's a privilege to get to work with those people every day. And you're not going to see that in a sector. I worked for IBM that's been around for over 100 years. You're like, it's great, it's reliable, but you're not going to get those people who are inspired and truly struck with the opportunity that they've got, because it's not groundbreaking. At the point, it's mature industries. And unless you're working in something like this, I don't think you get that lightning bolt.
Yeah, you get the guy that can't put the collar on the mannequin.
It was a blessing in disguise.
No, it was I was joking. It was the greatest blessing in disguise. All this stuff, we all know this. Working in, it's like everything's path dependent. The good things and bad things that happen, like led us all to this exact spot that we're here.
Everything happens for a reason. It's funny though, Jesse and I came from complete opposite ends. He had to get like a reverse MBA lobotomy, and I had to fail at getting a dog walking job.
Yeah. I was in the ivory tower, and I had to choose to leave the ivory tower and then decide that the ivory tower is wrong about everything. So that was my journey, the opposite direction. But yeah, then here we are, Marty. You and I get to write about the most fertile, possible landscape of topics for intellectual stimulation and article ideas ever. Because on the last trade, we were talking about how this is part of this is the American Revolution. This is the spirit of the American independence movement. But it's further. It goes back further than that. This is Martin Luther. The Satoshi posting the white paper, October 31st, was the equivalent of Martin Luther pinning up the 95 Theses on the cathedral door, saying, the authority has gone too far, and we the people are taking back our rights in that context in Christianity. And then the Declaration of Independence is the same spirit, focused on a different area of a different topic. It was patriots asserting the independence to govern themselves and freedom from autocracy. And then Satoshi posting the white paper is the Declaration of Monetary Independence, which is part of this lineage. It is equivalent in significance, in my mind, to those two prior documents. And I think in 100, 200 years from now, will be looked back on with the same sort of reverence. And so our opportunity in the here and now is to be a part of propagating that message. I mean, it becomes a little bit of proselytizing, but that's the reality of it, is that we are helping to take the Declaration of Monetary Independence and translate that into a better, brighter future built on that ethos. And so there's nothing more rewarding in that sense, and nothing more exciting in terms of being able to write about any topic.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
We're going to win. Gentlemen, all three of you, I'm very excited for you all doing what you're doing. Very pumped for Onramp, what you guys are launching in collaboration with BitGo and others.
We owe you a thanks, because you saw the vision early in the stuff we were talking about and came on and had us on the first and decided to become an advisor, and then co-host the last trade. And I think most people think you're full time working with Onramp. So no, we appreciate you seeing the vision and also just extending. There's a credibility. You've been in the space for a very long time, and you saw that this is something that needed to be in the market, and so it goes a long way in helping us, get that message out, which we think is an important one.
Yeah, I truly do believe this needs to exist. I was writing about it 2 years before Onramp was even an idea, so shout out to me. I kid.
I don't know if that one's true. You got to send me.
At least a year. I'll send you.
I think I was incepting this in your mind as part of that. So
maybe
I gotta.
Maybe I'm re-remembering right now.
Yeah, you're definitely re-remembering.
You're going to have to go back and give credit to Michael in that post, whatever it is you wrote.
Well, because sometimes we get concerned about like Marty leaking the alpha. There's a lot of alpha that exists in these walls that when we have these conversations, and sometimes make it to the vent. We go like, hey, Marty, put it back in the box.
That's part of my job here. It's part of my job. It's the alpha is sealed in an airtight container in my mind. Okay.
Part of this launch is we do have to shout out that we will be in Vegas for Money 2020 with the BitGo team hosting an event Monday night. So if anybody's around that's interested in attending, we've just posted some stuff on social, but reach out and we'll do our best to get the attendance right.
Yeah. I know we said, as we said on the last trade a lot, but the conversations were actually pretty different. So definitely go check out that episode as well. Gentlemen, congratulations. I'll definitely see you next week for the last trade. Have fun in Vegas. I'll let you know if I can go.
Send your family our best. You got to get home to them, and I'll have my wife send your wife a text asking if you can come to hang out with the boys in Vegas for a couple of days, and we'll just talk business. Nothing else.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes over. Mitch, it's been a pleasure speaking with you for the last 3 hours now.
Privilege is mine. It's been really fun. Awesome to be here.
Thank you for some insight into BitGo. It's really cool to see what you guys have built and how you guys are innovating moving forward.
Thanks.
All right. Jesse, I saw you mumbling. No?
No. I was gonna mention that, like, I don't know, people don't realize that BitGo is 20% of Bitcoin transactions. I didn't realize that. So, learning about BitGo is part of learning about knowing Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's what brought me, it was that stat and sort of understanding the significance that, we have to the industry is one of the reasons I picked BitGo. So
yeah, that's a lot of touching on the Bitcoin network right there. All right. It's been a pleasure. That's all we got today, freaks. Peace and love. Take care.